Turning truth to lies. Gotta get up, stop wasting time. Yeah, I wanna run off and fly. And I'll tell myself it's fine to be alone. Just to find somewhere that finally feels like home. I hate all this overthinking. The more I swim, the more I'm sinking. Take me to a world of silver. No more heartbreaks, tears, painkillers. Take me somewhere unfamiliar. Bring me back to where we started out. Get me out of now. To where we started out. Get me out of now. To where we started out. Oh no.
Hello and welcome back to the Woodshed, Sports Report. My name, of course, is Conrad Wood, and we'll be talking a bunch because it's been a bit. When last we talked, Colorado and Colorado and Montreal were still in the NHL playoffs. We had preseason games still in the CFL. WCBL hadn't started their season, and Cavalry were still undefeated. But we'll talk about all that and more. And hey, I decided we wouldn't talk Memorial Cup today because we're going to try a little bit of a different format today. Try and make it so I'm not tearing my throat apart. So we're going to try and do this. And hey, if you recognize you're in a workout shirt, Connor, yeah, I got to go to the gym right after the show today. So we're just killing two birds with one stone in that regard. But let's start with our first 20-minute segment here talking about the NHL playoffs. As I said, last time we talked, it was still with games to play. Vegas had just gone up 3-0. The Habs were kind of falling off, and hey, they had a game that night. So let's start there. Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Final. This was the second straight overtime of the series. And hey, Montreal just, in this series, this whole story is could not shoot the gosh darn puck on net. Didn't be much of a challenge for Freddie Anderson as this series went on. But it did require overtime eventually. This game in Montreal, so the second straight of them. But hey, the forecheck just wore Montreal down. Couldn't exit their zone cleanly. Wonder where else we're going to hear that in the series. And then it was the final. The Vegas Golden Knights in a tight defensive battle with a Cale Makar that wasn't at full health, but also a Ryan Strome that wasn't at full health. It was a complete sweep. The President's Trophy curse continues as Colorado gets to the Western Final, but can't cross that final hurdle. Golden Knights, they will head to the Stanley Cup Final. And hey, you see the jerseys behind me. We talk about it, the Flames on this channel a ton. But the fact of the matter is, this is somewhat good for the Calgary Flames. Of course, we all know that the Flames have been frequent trade partners with the Vegas Golden Knights. So if we look back to not the Rasmus Andersson trade, but the Noah Hanifin trade, of course, or Noah Hanifin? Is that the one? Where's my brain today? I had a good weekend, but a very busy weekend. Let me just double check because I don't want to lead you astray here with my reporting. It was not the Anderson, so it would have been the Hanifin trade. Or boy, where is my brain? Yes, it was the Hanifin trade. Of course, the Knights actually receiving Mikhail Vorobyov, technically from the Flames. The Flames retrieving the 2026 first round pick. That had a bunch of conditions, like if Vegas was to win the Stanley Cup Finals in this year, the Flames would still get that first round pick. But then that led to the trade of Mr. Rasmus Andersson and the conditional second in that draft. If the Vegas Golden Knights go and win the Stanley Cup that year, that second turns into a first. So in a way, Flames fans can be happy about this, but if you care about the legal system and how flawed it is, probably not as happy to see Vegas going to the finals. But yes, it will be the evil empire that doesn't care about players, doesn't care about anything other than winning. And hey, it's successful. They win Stanley Cups. And they've been successful since they entered the league. Then it goes to Wednesday, the 27th, Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Final. Hurricanes shut out the Habs 4-0. Freddie Andersen posting a shutout, but only a 13-save shutout. Possession completely in the hands of the Hurricanes. Montreal's struggles to shoot the puck even continued. And hey, like if you looked at the heat maps for the first 4 games of this year, or second 3 of the 4, the heat map for the Hurricanes did look like a storm surge. It looked like there was rain, shots coming from everywhere. And then if you looked at the Habs, it's like when you look at scattered showers around Calgary and area, and it's kind of the loop around Calgary. That's really what it looked like. Really kept the Habs shots when they came to perimeter opportunities or the occasional breakaway, and Freddie Andersen was up to the task. Final game of the Eastern Conference came on the 29th, and the Carolina Hurricanes exploded. Taylor Hall leading the way with a goal and assist. Logan Stankoven in a goal and 2 assists. Freddie making 23 saves in the do-or-die game for Les Habitants de Montréal, and the Habs will not be moving on. A valiant effort and a team that is, I'd say, leaps and bounds ahead of what they could be. I was listening to a podcast from a certain guy that yells at his camera in Toronto, and he really talked about how it is, at the end of the day, very impressive what the Habs have achieved. Because if you look at the timeline comparing the Leafs and the Habs, the Leafs had their core 4 for this entire Habs rebuild. At the start, they were just entering the league, of course, coming out of the pandemic. And then it was a rebuild for the Habs starting. And in the time that the Leafs had their core 4, of course, obviously Mitch Marner now with the Vegas Golden Knights, but in their core 4 era, the Leafs have won Game 7 in round 2 to talk about. And the Habs have gone from being in the Stanley Cup Finals to the bottom, drafting first overall, and have come back and now look like they're going to be contenders for a little while. Have 2 NHL starting level goaltenders in Jacob Dovish and Cam Fowler. And hey, they're probably going to be shopping Sam Montembeault over the next couple of weeks to months. So hey, there could be another good goalie to enter the rest of the league coming via the Habs, but of course that means it is Carolina to face off against the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, that starts tomorrow. Game 1 is in Raleigh, 8 p.m. Eastern, so 6 p.m. Mountain puck drop. Vegas went a combined 8-0 in games 3 and 4 after trailing early in Game 3 of that series. And hey, Carolina, to their credit, they went back to the ways that had got them to the dance, outscoring Montreal 13-3 over the final 3 games. So you have to think Game 1 was the outlier. And I think we can all agree in that. But these teams both arrive in different ways. Of course, Vegas was the team that was the plucky, we're not going to lose, we're fighting for our spot in the quote-unquote pillow fight division. And the Hurricanes have come in as the second best team in the NHL, only behind the Colorado Avalanche in the regular season, and then just dominated their way through their 3 rounds. They played 1 game over the minimum to get here. And stylistically, they couldn't be more different either. The Hurricanes, they're a forecheck puck pressure. We're going to limit opportunities because you're going to be in your zone for most of the game. Looking to win puck battles, O-zone time, wear down opposing defensemen. And not necessarily need to have the scoring explosion, but the scoring explosion generally happens just because the other team gets tired in the third period and can't keep up the pace. And it's also, that comes with team defense, like gap control, not allowing the transition, and shot suppression. Like, I don't think the Habs weren't trying to shoot the puck. I think that Hurricanes just don't allow high danger chances very often. And hey, Freddie Andersen, like, I thought Freddie, looking at his age, was toast at the start of the season. And hey, in the regular season, he was the worst of the 2 goaltenders. But through the playoffs, he has been exemplary. Brandon Bussi obviously gets them to the show, but the show still has gone through Freddie Anderson, and Freddie Anderson has earned the trust of the Canes. Carolina, however, does have some weaknesses. Sorry, I'm just getting some text from my family. They're talking about their seats at the Saddledome and want my opinion. Hey, I know something about sports. They sometimes struggle to finish and score. This is historically, of course, being better this year, but if Vegas can limit those chances, and hey, they're a pretty good team, not going to grow as tired in that third period, you have to think. But if Vegas limits the rebound, and Carter Hart begrudgingly has been very good at that in the playoffs, we'll have to see if they can score. Carolina has tremendous depth, but they don't have a true superstar in the way that Vegas does. Like Mitch Marner in this playoffs has been everything advertised to the rest of the league, and it's going to be very hard to shut him down. So that's where the teams differ. Of course, I'll talk about the strengths of the Vegas Golden Knights because they have two high-end stars in Mitch Marner and Jack Eichel. Marner leads the postseason with 21 points, and when Vegas is on, they are hard to stop. Like, we've seen that throughout the series with the Avalanche. And hey, the fact that Carolina doesn't have necessarily a star D-man in the way that Colorado does, but maybe they can limit Marner and Eichel with the fact that there isn't that peak and valley. It's just kind of flat across the skill level of all their defensemen. And remember, almost everyone did contribute in the elimination of the Avs. So whereas they do have the two stars in Eichel and Marner, they do have numerous guys. Like, hey, Rasmus Anderson's been kind of quiet in this playoff series, but we've, as Flames fans, all know that Rasmus can explode and just decide he wants to take over a game. Multiple lines did get goals against the Avs, and they have this ability to handle chaos. Because you have to think of that game 3 against the Avs, down 3-0 early on, battling back on the road. They have the mental toughness. So even if those wave over wave of the Hurricanes does come, they've been there before against a team that did have the President's Trophy, did have some big guns of their own. Like Nathan McKinnon is, even when hurt, is better than most players in the NHL. Mental toughness does matter. And hey, Carter Hart, as begrudging as I am to give many flowers, has quietly been one of the best goalies in the playoffs. Should he have been given this opportunity? That's for you in your own opinion to work out. But there's a reason he's the only one of the 5 that has gotten this chance at redemption. Because he did have that level in Philadelphia, reuniting with John Tortorella. Like, it's just kind of a lightning in a bottle moment for that young goaltender. But let's talk about the weaknesses. Carolina style is a nightmare matchup. Vegas wants that rush opportunity, that traditional zone time. And that is exactly what Rod DeBod and co. try to limit. They try and stifle things out quickly and aggressively. And Vegas has really, really excelled on the power play. And hey, Carolina, power play numbers, very, very bad, no good. But Carolina has the best penalty kill, and the numbers for it through these playoffs has actually been kind of astounding. They have absolutely just sucked the air out of power play's lungs throughout this run, and that's where it goes. And I apologize, folks. I am going to have to take a break here, and it is going to be a bit of a longer one. I'm not even going to run my timer because I need to get back to these people. I will be back. We will continue the stream. I just don't know if I'm going to start the timer on it. Thank you very much. I will be right back. Here is the Spotify playlist. All right, folks. Sorry about that, but we are back. Thought something urgent had happened and I needed to be in contact, but I was wrong. Just kept getting texts and pings, so figured better to check that out. And sorry about delaying things. But let's get into some key matchups. We'll do a couple extra minutes here, and then we'll go into our timed, as you saw, the 3-minute timer break. I'll cut that down to 2 since we took a minute off there. But regardless, the key matchups for this series is obviously we talked about the two goaltenders, Carter Hart versus Freddie Anderson. Hart, the more athletic of the two goaltenders and definitely younger. He is somebody that flies around the net and throws his body on the line. And Anderson is just steady as it can go. Both have been very, very instrumental for these teams. As it is often the joke, you want to see a good playoff team, point to the goaltender. Or if you want to see a good coach, point to the goaltender. I think both have gotten the absolute most out of both their goaltenders. It is kind of even. The stars in this series, Marner and Eichel versus Carolina's defense. Like, you're going to need to try and limit those zone entries. Keep Vegas to the outside like you did with Montreal and prevent the odd man rushes. If they can do that, it controls how this goes. But if Marner continues to be as red hot as he has been, that's where Carolina will falter. And it's a tale of Carolina's forecheck versus Vegas's breakout. If Carolina can keep Vegas trapped in, it limits their shots. It gives them more zone time, and a lot of their forecheck has been drawing penalties. So even with how abysmal Carolina's power play has been in the playoffs, that's still a benefit for them. If Vegas gets clean breaks, you get that rush offense, get the transitional, and you get that open ice skill advantage that we talked about that Vegas has. That's the tactical battle that this series will go through. And of course, Carolina does have the advantage of home ice. It's not a huge travel series that we've seen like Edmonton and Florida in the last 2 years. But Carolina, they've been a wagon. As I said, they've lost one game in the entire playoffs. They have a better defensive structure. They had a coach that's been with them for more than, let's call it, a month and a half at this point. And remember, they've lost one game. That is game 1 against Carolina after they had 12 days off. Or against Montreal, rather. So the firepower and the ceiling, I think, does have me leaning Carolina. I'm going to say Carolina in 6 as my prediction on stream. But hey, if Vegas can throw some chaos into the works, win game 1 in Raleigh, I think that could have Carolina back on their heels a little bit. But I think that's not likely to happen. So you kind of just have to say, what are we looking at here in terms of the playoffs? And I know for myself, I was joking with the people in the Okotoks Dogs press box that aren't we glad the NHL playoffs ended, or NHL ended last week, because there's no real interest in watching either of these teams. But for Flames fans, hey, there is that minor incentive in the Vegas Golden Knights going all the way and winning the Stanley Cup. If you can stomach that. So maybe that's the silver lining you look at as a Flames fan and what you hope for. Or maybe you just watch because you want to see the meteor crater impact and cheer for the world ending rather than watching this hockey series. I don't blame you either way, but we are going to go to our 2-minute timed break. Go grab yourself a water, some coffee, but we'll be back here on the Woodshed Sports Report.
I see the light inside you, brighter than the skies. Hold on on, just let us escape and fly away tonight. We have the world in our sight, and I know together we'll be alright. Can you see forever we will go?
And of course, I hit some of the wrong buttons. And I forgot to change this topic. We're just going to turn that off. Is what it is. Be more prepared for the next show, Conrad. But our second topic, as we go on here, again, my name's Conrad Wood, the host of the Woodshed Sports Report. The CFL season starts Thursdays, and final cuts needed to happen. And not a lot of surprising cuts for the Calgary Stampeders, but let's go across some of the bigger news from some of the other camps around the CFL. It's not often you see a guy with NFL experience get cut in camp, but Jalen Durden out of the BC Lions is one of the final cuts out in BC. Like, he is a return specialist in a league that is certainly wanting to evolve to keep the special teams as one of the more important parts of the game. Jalen Durden, the fact that he couldn't cut it in BC, like, he is a fast, shifty guy, and he was going to be part of a receiving core that maybe had some flaws. Of course, catching the ball from Nathan Rourke hides a lot of those flaws. Rourke being, I'd put in the best of the young quarterbacks in the CFL. So the fact that he couldn't crack that roster in a position that isn't the deepest in the CFL and added that X factor in the return game is kind of a shock. Like, that is really, really unexpected for me. Like, he was one of the people that a lot of people had highlighted. Of course, I didn't get a lot of chance to watch a lot of BC Lions preseason football because, hey, not getting CFL Plus. But yeah, kind of an interesting choice. And then Marquez Galloway, another former NFL receiver, like, looked like he was gonna make a impact in the CFL. He was actually an early cut in camp, but given the name recognition, NFL caliber, like, hey, the fact that he couldn't break into that group in BC, another signal, like, hey, it isn't a retirement home for NFL players the way it used to be when Terrell Owens and co just come north of the border. Like, the fact that Johnny Manziel, say what you will about Johnny football, had a boatload of talent, just could never get over the line here in the CFL. But it's showing that this isn't just a retirement home. And of course, not only in BC is this happening, Juwan Winfrey cut again, had regular season NFL experience with the Packers and was cut twice by the Riders. Like, his size, pro resume, expected just to make the regular season almost with a bullet. But the Riders just said, you know what? No, you're not good enough. Like, this is a guy who bounced around the NFL at time with the Colts. Denver was selected him in 2019. Like, of course, a little bit of an older guy too, and you have to think that might have played in to the decision for the Riders. But hey, again, this is a league that is continuing to evolve. And another name with the Riders that had NFL, Darnell Henderson Jr., of course, again, older, kind of viewing the CFL as his last chance to play pro ball. Was a high pick and had out of Memphis and had some good years with the Rams, but just you get a longer look having that on your resume, and the fact that in the second reduction he was gone says a lot. And then on final cutdown day, Peyton Logan cut by the Argos. Like, this is a guy who's had a fairly decent CFL career. And of course, former Calgary Stampeder, and was a guy that I think a lot of people figured the Argos would take a longer look at. But hey, brutal league, and especially being an import, it does change the math a little bit. But here's somebody I could see the Stampeders taking another look at as he does get cut. And it's a Canadian, Hergy Mayala, like, known CFL, Canadian receiver, proven experience, gives you that flexibility in the ratio. But hey, he was one of the more interesting veteran decisions not being continued on by the BC Lions. And as we said, this was a receiving core that not a lot of people rated very highly going in. And the fact that Hergy couldn't break that, maybe comes back to Calgary, maybe gets a chance going over to Ottawa, reunite with Jake Mayer, who is the day one starter in Ottawa. But we'll have to see. Dylan Wynn, obviously a veteran defensive lineman, has been a CFL starter everywhere he goes, but the Red Blacks have decided he is not for them. Many years in Montreal before going to the Hammer, and just gets cut here. And then the son of Terrell Owens, Tariq Owens, had time in Montreal system for a long time, but does get cut in the final round of cut. Many fans kind of expected him to be on the practice roster, but didn't survive. And BJ Thompson, the guy that Calgary released, went up to Edmonton and then released again. Like, he was an NFL caliber prospect, but just, I don't know if it's a personnel issue or a personality issue, but just can't stick. And then, of course, the other big news is here in Calgary. Of course, talked about cuts from around the league. Stampeders make their final cuts as well. And with those final cuts comes a signing, a man returning from the NFL. Jalen Hutchings wasn't just a good defensive lineman in 2025, was one of the most disruptive on the interior of the defensive line. And hey, this is a league where the 300-pounder doesn't survive very long, but Jalen Hutchings was the exception to the rule. Allowed for a very, very young and inexperienced Stampeders defense last year to get some pressure on the quarterback, using that defensive tackle position to collapse the interior of the pocket. And interior pressure in the CFL is rare. You have none of guys coming from the inside very often and causing commotion for quarterbacks. It's usually those edge rushers that are more of the presence on defense. But Hutchings signs not only for this year, but signs a 3-year contract with the Stampeders after leaving for a NFL futures deal. And for guys to sign 3-year deals in the CFL, we all know how rare that is if you're a CFL fan. Like, guys only sign 1 to 2-year deals because it's just such a volatile league. Unless you're a quarterback or maybe one of the star receivers, getting term doesn't happen. And the fact that the Stampeders offered the term, knowing that, hey, this is a guy that left us to go see if the grass really was greener on the other side, and elects to return, is a big statement. And you have to remember, as I said, a young that allowed for that defensive backfield that was super young and inexperienced to not face as much pressure. Because if you're collapsing pockets, taking down running backs as an interior D lineman, it allows those guys in the back to not feel that they are the last line, or not required to be the last line as often. And a guy that the Minnesota Vikings obviously had some thoughts on him before his hamstring injury. Like, number one, you have to hope that injury isn't as severe as that being released from an NFL roster could believe it is. But hey, if he continues and is the foundation for the Stampeders defense for years to come, in the way that Charleston Hughes has been in the past for numerous CFL teams, it could be a huge upgrade and a huge statement from the Calgary Stampeders and put them into contention in a West Division that keeps getting better. Because as much as you view probably the BC Lions as a lock to make playoffs, and probably the Rough Riders, I think the Stampeders have pushed their name into that territory. And retaining a pass rusher that's coming into his prime, of course, as I mentioned, injury. You have to hope it's not as severe. This is essentially retaining a guy that was so vital to you. After letting him grow wings, letting him go see if the grass is greener on the other side, allowing him to see if, hey, that really is where he wants to be. In other news, Trey Ford finally might be outstanding in a backup role. Of course, he's in Hamilton behind Bo Levi Mitchell, but Bo Levi had some periods in time last year where he did look shaky. There might be some opportunity to Trey Ford to knock, and hey, if he puts it together, who knows where the East will be. Kenny Lawler allegedly signing that huge contract in the offseason. Like, is it becoming where a non-quarterback can justify taking up cap space? Between re-signing Jalen Hutchings and actually showing some pretty good preseason depth, are the Stampeders going to be West Division challengers, as I've said? But hey, with final cuts just happening, the rookies are under the microscope. Will this be a weak rookie class? I think it will be. But we'll have to see as this season goes on. And of course, the media rights deal, sending multiple games a week to DAZN and taking some of that out of Canadian hands. Is this the deal that allows the Canadian Football League to finally find that younger audience who already has DAZN to watch NFL games? Who knows? These are all some interesting stories to watch as we continue on. We're going to head on to a 3-minute break here. When we return, we will be talking a little bit of WCBL. Actually, you know what? Let's talk Cavalry first. We'll be back with Cavalry news when you return here on the Woodshed Sports Report. Oh, I forgot to turn off my mute on the music, so you had a 3-minute silence period there. I apologize. I was the only one getting to listen to the music. Hey, this is why I need some moderators. PYOCS, hello. Welcome to the Woodshed Sports Report. As we return, we're going to talk a little bit about some soccer. Of course, talking primarily about Cavalry FC, the soccer team that is home to me here in Calgary, Alberta, as they headed out this week to Forge FC. And of course, if you've watched the Cav at all, you know that this is one of their biggest rivalries. Of course, both teams have been at the top of the Canadian Premier League since its inception. And Forge has had Cavalry's number in the first few seasons, but over the last 2 seasons, Cavalry FC have eliminated them from playoff contention. Technically twice, but in the 2024 season, kind of bounced them twice, of course, with the weird playoff structure that the CPL entails. Forge was the top seed, coming top of the table in the regular season, so they effectively had double elimination. That a game head-to-head against Cavalry at home twice, where Cavalry came in as the second seed, beats them, drops Forge down into playing in their secondary bracket, and then they met again in Hamilton twice, and Cavalry defeated them both times to bring home the North Star Shield, or North Star Trophy. Shield, obviously, being the award for the regular season. And then last year, they met in the second, or in that I don't want to call it consolation bracket, but the second chance final, and Cavalry knocks them out there as well. And then we don't talk about the Snow Bowl game in Ottawa. But for the first time in the 2026 season, Cavalry FC do fall a 1-0 final to Forge. And that was a tough pill to swallow, because obviously you thought that this would be the game where Cavalry would eke out another draw at worst, as they have already drawn once in Forge, or at Hamilton Stadium, now that it's not branded Tim Hortons Field. But it's a game where Cavalry had chances. Well, both teams did. You had a couple headers coming off the head of a couple of Forge strikers. And, of course, that's tough. Enough jibber jabber. Let's talk about Arsenal bottling the Champions League final. I gotta say, I didn't watch the Champions League final. I did not necessarily care about Arsenal, but we will discuss that in a bit. I gotta do the local stuff first, then we'll talk Champions League. And we'll also talk about Marcelo Flores, who, if you're a fan from overseas, you might not know as much about him, but he was someone that was key for Canada and tore his ACL in the CONCACAF Champions League final. But let me finish this thought about Cavalry. Just missed some of their margins. Kanija Elva got his head to the ball a couple of times, just missing the woodwork a few times. Pius, yes, we are talking Canadian soccer. We talked CFL a little bit earlier. If you want to go back on the VODs, will be all stored on YouTube. Same name, Woodshed Sports Report, over on YouTube if you want to go watch about Canadian football, hand egg, helmets, all that. But yeah, we are talking about footy, soccer, the Canadian Premier League. But yeah, for Cavalry, a bit of a tough one there. Again, top 2 teams in the league meeting off, and with the 3 points, Forge do head to the top of the table. as said by the captain, Sergio Camargo, fine margin's the only way to put it. We had our chances, we just didn't put them away, and they have one big chance, and they put theirs away. And that was the separation. And it was Anton Baptiste with the goal for Forge. And hey, they have a 2-point advantage at the top of the 8-team table. And let's talk about Marcelo Flores. Obviously, just devastating. Canada announces the team on Saturday, or on Friday rather. He's named to the Canadian World Cup roster. And just a day later, in the absolute final game before most leagues head into their World Cup break, a non-contact injury, an ACL tear, gonna need months and months off, not just I think it's 32 days to the kickoff of the World Cup, but man, it's just so awful. Another question from Pio CS. Do I support a Premier League team? I do not. I support any Canadians wherever they roam in terms of football on the European continent. So I'm more of a Bayern Munich kind of supporter. And I actually cheer, if I were to cheer for any team in the pyramid in the UK, it would actually be Nottingham Forest currently, as they employ Bim Peppel for now. There's been lots of transfer rumors about our boy Bim. Of course, Abram Peppel started his career here in Cavalry FC before heading across to his success in the UK. But yeah, it's so tough for one of the most versatile players that Canada was bringing to the World Cup. Obviously, when you think Canada, you think of Alphonso Davies. The fact that you can probably play him as a left back, as a true left back, as they play him at Bayern, or you can move him further up the pitch as the match advances, allowing you that flexibility. But you also had Marcelo Flores, who can come on as a 9, can come on the wing. But now, obviously, you are looking at bringing a replacement player. Of course, Canada does have a single game, or a pair of games, one going on literally today as the Canadiens take on, I can't remember who they're facing today. That should be a question that I should know. Up in Edmonton. It's Uzbekistan that they're playing, of course. This was a friendly setup to give them kind of a view, because Uzbekistan plays similar to Bosnia and Herzegovina, who they will be facing off against in the World Cup. And then you have Ireland coming to Canada for the final friendly before the World Cup. That one will be played in Montreal. They're the closest parallel that Canada could get to Switzerland as they prepare for the World Cup. So they have to see who steps up coming out of this camp, see who will be named as that replacement. And of course, as XL Bean pointed out, thank you for joining us here in the chat. We'll talk a little bit about the UCL final. Of course, I, as a Canadian supporter, was really hoping that somehow Celtic would have made it there, so you would have seen Alistair Johnson potentially, or if somehow Bayern had got their way past PSG, that they would have been a challenge for Arsenal as well. But people are calling it a bottle job for Arsenal. Honestly, I think they had the weakest tournament run-up in comparison. Like, they didn't have to run into one of the giants. They didn't have to run into a team like Bayern. Like, I think going into it, Arsenal just didn't have the journey that they needed. And hey, they ran into a buzzsaw. Like, Kai Havertz is obviously a phenom, but Dembele from the penalty spot, I think the better team won. I'm not going to call it a bottle job. I know there's plenty other of places that will, probably anywhere outside of Arsenal in the United Kingdom. And of course, the miss by Nuno Mendes is going to be analyzed from the PSG side. And Eza and Malagas failing to convert on their penalties. It's tough. Like, Dembele is still one of the top names in football. William Saliba obviously kept Arsenal alive for a long time. I'm not necessarily going to call it as much of a bottle as others. I still think, regardless of the health of PSG, they are still one of the top teams in the Champions League. And they didn't get there with an easy road. They took on a nearly full health Bayern team to make it to the final. And I think if you play this game 10 times, I think 7 to 8 of those go the way of Paris Saint-Germain. Of course, this is a view of somebody who does not watch a ton of European football. Keep that in mind. I watch a lot of domestic and a lot of international, like national level football, but I don't watch a ton of the Champions League games. But I guess anytime you can get a UCL match to penalties, it really is the luck of the gods. Are you the one that's in favor? Who knows? It really does change a lot. And penalties are ethereal. Like, of course, going into a final like that, you have to imagine that both clubs did have their training in to be ready for penalties. But doing something in training even with all the audio stuff that teams can bring in, they'll emulate the crowd, but it doesn't emulate the pressure. And yes, these are professional athletes that you're talking about that are definitely paid handsomely to show up in these moments. But it's just interesting to see what happens even at the highest level. But with that high level comes high pressure, and Arsenal just weren't able to be there at that time. So I think that's where we're going to end it on football. But we will be back after this break talking a little bit more about the Western Canadian Baseball League and its opening weekend that I was a part of. We'll be back on the other side of this 3-minute break here on the Woodshed Sports Report.
There ain't no stopping us. Fly without boarding pass. Couldn't catch me, I'll be moving fast. Call me a shooting star. Let 'em know who you are. Flying up in a bar. Wish on a star. Time to show 'em who's in charge. Call me a shooting star. Even get to bronze. looking at a shooting star. Got more than a couple of people going mad, I swear they're rooting hard. Tell them I'd be big in the game like she went and got them breast implants. I said I'm moving too fast, didn't even get a glance. I'm ready to eat up track like I'm seated in a restaurant. If you had swag like mine, you know it's best to flaunt. We aren't hating because you aren't shining like it's neon, rock like kings of Leon. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltration with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltration with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Yeah, shooting. Yeah, shooting. Yeah, shooting. Yeah, shooting shots. Shooting stars. Didn't even get to cross. I said I'm moving too far. Get to glass.
Welcome back to the Woodshed Sports Report. Our final segment here of our Monday show, talking about the Western Canadian Baseball League. Hey, I was out in Okotoks for all two games that took place over the weekend, of course. Supposed to have one yesterday, but that one a victim of the rain that came across southern Alberta, and they weren't the only ones, with numerous ball clubs deciding they were not able to play the game safely. And of course, protecting the young athletes is of the utmost importance. And hey, we're in a yellow rainfall warning, and the Elbow rivers are effectively as high as they can get without flooding the city of Calgary. So I think that's probably the safest play for the Alberta Baseball League. Well, I guess Alberta and Saskatchewan. But truly an interesting opening weekend across the league, as the only undefeated team is the Okotoks Dawgs. And hey, there's some good teams out east as well, allowing the weather out there, allowing them to actually play some extra games. But yeah, let's look at the league standings. In the East, it's the Regina Red Sox and Saskatoon Berries up at the top, tied for the league lead, or the Eastern Conference lead at 3-1 records. Of course, the difference being the Saskatoon Berries have a plus 26 run differential after they had a very, very good start to the season. Of course, playing a lot of games against Weyburn. The Regina Red Sox only a plus 6, but hey, margin of victory just matters for placing. As long as you win more games than the Berries, you will find your way to the top. Moose Jaw Miller Express, they're at 2-1, and then Swift Current is at 1-2. 57s and Moose Jaw facing off in their opening series. And then it's the Medicine Hat Mavericks at 1-3, and the Weyburn Beavers down at that 1-3 mark. Of course, Weyburn with the largest run differential on the negative side, minus 28. Then looking at the West, it's the Okotoks Dawgs. They lead a 3-0 record. Of course, had a rainout against the Lethbridge Bulls. But speaking of those very same Bulls, they're 2-1 with a minus 5 run differential. We'll talk about why that is in a sec. Energy City, they're 1-1 with a +1 in the run differential. Fort Mac, they're also 1-1 with a -1 run differential. Sylvan Lake, they came in their opening series against the Okotoks Dawgs. They split that, or they lose both games of that series, but win their next one against Brooks. They're at 1-2, and the Brooks Bombers, they're the only team that has not found a way to win yet. They're at 0-3. But hey, early on in the season. But we're going to mainly care about the Okotoks Dawgs here on this show. So we'll talk a little bit about their series or season thus far. Talk about the opening series. And talk about where you can go to actually view stats if you want. Because if everyone doesn't know, this is the first day without point streak. The points and stats system that has been around for quite a while. A lot of leagues used it, but of course, they shuttered yesterday. So yeah, now if you want your Western Canadian Baseball League stats and live in-game just statistical reporting, it's on ballclubs.com. ballclubs.com/WCBL. That's where you'll want to go. But talking about Okotoks, their first game was the season opener, and it was out in Sylvan Lake. The Dawgs win with some aggressive base running, allowing them to score some extra runs. They win 8-4, 10 hits, 0 errors, and 10 left on base. However, for Sylvan Lake, just a calamity of errors. 4 runs on 4 hits, 4 errors, and 6 runners left on base. Of course, a lot of well-known players for the Dawgs. Only a couple of new additions, but some that I think you'll get to know throughout the season. Kraus in the outfield. Cal Gates also in the outfield. He's one of the hottest players in the WCBL statistically. But the returning players really are the ones that a lot of people are focusing on. Ricardo Sanchez, Connor Croson, and Ash Kroll all contributing in that game. Sanchez hitting a double, Connor hitting a triple, and Cal Gates with the triple and a couple of steals. Very interesting to see how this team will mature throughout this season. So 8-4 in the first game, and then Sylvan Lake comes to Okotoks looking to ruin the homecoming. But they lead only for 8.5 innings. The Dawgs use a 3-run ninth to walk it off in the game. In a game that saw a bunch of arms come out for the Dawgs, and unfortunately Austin Collins, one of the returning Dawgs pitchers, left with some forearm discomfort. Haven't heard anything additional on him. But Brody Forno had to come in quickly. Jeremy Pare comes in. And unfortunately, he gives up 4 earned. Dylan Hoffer, Jack Bellow, Jack Thompson, and Bryden White handle the pitching for the Dawgs. As the final reach was Jeremy Kuiper reaching on the fielder's choice to score Leo Cote. That's in the final run. Dawgs at 2-0 after that game. But then the Dawgs bats come alive. We'd seen in the previous day an 18-0 finish and a 21-6 finish out in Weyburn and Lethbridge in comparison. The Dawgs said, "Hold my beverage. Hold my dog water." Dog water, of course, being one of the wonderful brews available at Siemens Stadium from Hard Knocks Brewing. 26-1 in what turned into a 7.5 inning mercy rule. And this wasn't a game that errors just got away from Lethbridge. However, walks got out of hand. 19 hits for the Dawgs, 26 runs, 0 errors, and they even left 6 on base. To start this game against Lethbridge, In fact, the Dawgs went 0 for 8 to start this one. You heard me right. A game that ended 26-1 started with the Dawgs not reaching base until they hit the bottom of their own order. In fact, it was the first hit wasn't until Connor Croson, who singled up the middle in the bottom of the third in that 2-out rally. It was a pair of walks to Ricky Sanchez, or a trio of walks, rather. Hank Griffin walking, Ricky Sanchez walking, and Cal Gates walking as well. But then the floodgates opened, a 10-run fourth inning for the Dawgs. You had that on that scoreboard where it will stay 0 and then it'll flash 1, go to 0, signaling that there was 10 runs. And then a 9-run bottom of the 5th was all she wrote until, well, there was more runs scored, but it was really interesting here because a little bit later, they pinch hit Ashton Luera, their 96-mile-an-hour fireball throwing closer. He steps in, flies out to center field, scores the final run of the ball game. You have to go and look at the photos because Ash looks like he is the absolute happiest human being on the planet as he hits. And you could hear fans that were down by the dugout saying Ash was celebrating that he got an RBI. And I went down and asked him when his last competitive at-bat was. And that was his first year in JUCO, where he wasn't even pitching. He was a catcher his first year at JUCO. So, you know what? Not bad for the Dawgs. Taking on a Lethbridge team that to that point was 2-0. And as I said, the previous night had put up 21 runs on Swift Current. They come into Okotoks, get smacked a little bit, and it is a postponed game. They're supposed to play yesterday at Siemens Stadium. That game has been pushed. It will be going on Wednesday. Of course, there's technically a game listed for today in Lethbridge. That game is not going. I think it's already been acknowledged on social media that it will not be played due to the amount of water we're receiving from the skies. But yeah, that's where we stand in the WCBL. We'll talk a little bit about some of the stories coming out here before we end the show, because I got to go pump some iron. So we'll talk about this. And the reigning champions have immediately become a target opening the season on the road. And hey, every East Division matchup is going to be that measuring stick. Can you keep up with the team that, hey, through a couple of hardships, did manage to eliminate the Berries? And the fact that they've come into Medicine Hat, won on Sunday, narrowly escaped a scare against Moose Jaw. In fact, splitting that series, both games by a 10-9 score going either way. And again, that opening game against the Mavs, like an 8-6 final. Close games for the Red Sox. Other teams trying to use them as a measuring stick. Of course, it's win or go home for the Berries. Ever since their inception, they've been one of the teams to watch. They had a very strong opening weekend against Weyburn, especially the first two games where they went 13-3 to win on opening day at Tom Lang, and then 18-0 as well at Tom Lang Park in Weyburn. So they win the first two games by a combined score of 31-1. Then they fall at the next gen game at Cairns Field. Of course, that's the Heritage game, I do believe. Where that wasn't the Heritage game. That was actually their Berries at Berries Field at Next Gen Patch. 7-6 win, and then they go and do the... Oh, no, never mind. They weren't in that. Anyways, at the Patch, they do lose to Weyburn 9-8 to round out their weekend. They did have the next generation, or the Heritage game at Curry Field. Was that? Oh no, we just have the wrong place. It was the Weyburn and Saskatoon Berries in that Heritage game, not played at the next gen Patch. Of course, honoring some of the fields around Alberta that have hosted baseball for years and years in this province. Bringing the game back to some of these smaller communities. But that is where it is for the WCBL. And then obviously we'll talk about that Okotoks and Sylvan Lake still is the Alberta rivalry. Of course, the Dawgs have been on top for a long time. Sylvan, since they've come into the league in that 2021 season, have been challenging them the whole way. But the Dawgs are still carrying the reputation of the league's dynasty, while the Gulls remain one of the challengers that matches in both atmosphere and expectations. Of course, falling short in the second of the games. But hey, it's a long season. There will be plenty of more Gulls versus Dawgs action to come. Medicine Hat is getting some serious respect. The Mavs entered with more buzz than they've had in a year after 34 wins last year. There's real talks that they could challenge these traditional Alberta powers instead of just being expected to go there one round and bounced. Is the hype real? I don't necessarily think it is. Of course, their 1-3 record doesn't have me with a lot of confidence. But hey, they only have a -6 in their point differential. Despite their record, they could certainly challenge a little bit more. And the Berries, they're going to be in that battle all season long. They aren't the quiet, oh, look at their branding, look at how they've started. No, they're a team to be seriously contended with in every game. And the New Look West Division is wide open behind the two favorites. Everyone knows about Okotoks, everyone knows about the Gulls, but the Bulls, Mavericks, and hey, even Energy City trying to prove that they can contend. Might be a bit of a longer season for my friend Graham Mosman, the play-by-play voice up north for Fort Mac, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. Tough opening series and opening to the season for the Bombers as well. But in the Alberta side, the biggest takeaway is the old hierarchy hasn't really gone away. Still the Dawgs on top, Sylvan right behind them, and then everybody else trying to scrap and claw and prove and get to that playoff and try and be upset city for whoever they take on. But I think we'll call it here, an hour and 15-minute show. I like this, doing the little bit more broke down segments, quick intermissions between. Hopefully you guys who are watching either live or watching the VODs also agree. If you have any questions, comments, I don't just read the live chat. I go through and read the comments that you guys leave after. So as I said, VODs are over on YouTube. Give us a follow over there. If you're watching on Twitch, please hit that follow button. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Do all the things that allow me to get a little bit further north or further exploration. If you like the stream, go throw it up on, or throw a link up on the social media of your choice. Maybe not Facebook, that site's awful. I've heard that their AI is now also allowing anyone to get into any Instagram account right now. So, hey, be safe on the internet. But for myself, Conrad Wood, and the Woodshed Sports Report, this has been your Monday report. And hey, we may have to cancel the Friday again just because of lots of things going on in Okotoks. But I'm planning to be back again on Wednesday, where we'll talk some Flames. We'll talk about Game 1 of the playoffs. And we'll probably break down a little bit more Stampeders news. But we'll see what we got on Wednesday. Thank you very much, everyone.